Happy Birthday, Addy, A Springtime Story by Connie Porter. Chapter 1, Double Dutch. The jump rope slapped on the sidewalk as Addy took her place at the end of the line of girls who were playing double dutch after school. Addy had just missed for the fourth time. "Don't worry," said her good friend Sarah. "Just keep trying. You'll get it. Double dutch is hard." Addy agreed. "It sure is. I can jump with one rope just fine, but the minute I try to jump into two, I get all tangled up. The ropes go so fast I can hardly see them." "That'll change," said Sarah. "Just don't get discouraged." In spite of her troubles with double dutch, Addy felt happy on this pretty spring day. Papa had been back with her and Mama for 3 months. They had moved out of Mrs. Ford's garret and into a boarding house. It was almost like having a big family again, except that Addy's brother Sam and baby sister Esther weren't there. Maybe that'll change someday too, she thought. "Look at there," Sarah said, pointing up the street. "Ain't that your papa driving the ice wagon?" Addy looked where Sarah was pointing. "That's Papa," Addy exclaimed. "Let's go meet him." The girls took off and raced down the block. "Well, well," Papa said in his deep voice when the girls reached the wagon. "Look what the wind done blown my way. I reckon you girls could use a nice chunk of ice to cool you down." "I sure could," said Sarah, panting from the run. "Me too," said Addy with a smile. Papa got down from his seat. The girls followed him to the back where he opened the doors of the wagon. Inside were huge blocks of ice. Addy could feel a moist coolness come from inside. Papa slipped on a pair of thick gloves and took an ice pick from his belt. As he chipped away at a block of ice, glittering slivers flew into the air. He handed Sarah and Addy each a piece of ice the size of a small slice of pie. "If you girls want to ride home, I'm going to be heading that way in a bit. I got a few stops to make first," Papa said. "We'd like to ride. Come on, Sarah," Addy said. "I can't," said Sarah. "I got to get right straight home and help my mama." "All right," Addy said. "I'll see you tomorrow." She was disappointed. Sarah often had to help her mother do the washing that she took in to earn money. Addy and Papa climbed onto the wagon as Sarah left. Papa slapped the reins on the horse's back, and the wagon moved away from the curb. Addy sat close to Papa, sucking on her piece of ice. It was like holding a piece of winter. Addy had to shift it from hand to hand as it slowly melted and dripped. Papa gave her his huge gloves. "Wear these," he said, "so your hands won't get cold." "I wish Sarah ain't have to help her mama so much," Addy said as she put the gloves on. "I wish she didn't neither," Papa said, "but her family need the money." He shook his head. "I never did expect things to be easy in freedom, but I didn't think things would be so hard either." Addy looked at Papa. His big smile had melted away. His face looked serious. "When me and Mama first got here, I didn't like Philadelphia at all," Addy said softly. "Mama worked real hard, and I spent most of my time alone in our room. I was missing you and Sam and Esther something awful. But Mama kept saying things was going to get better. It was going to take time for things to change." "Sometimes it seems like change is as slow as this here tired old horse," Papa sighed. "But at least in Philadelphia, things can change for the better." "That's true," Addy said, finishing her ice and removing Papa's gloves. "When we was down on the plantation, there was no chance for things to change." "Slavery was draining the life out of all of us," said Papa. "That's one reason I knew we had to take our freedom." Addy spread out her arms. "Here in Philadelphia, it seems like my world getting bigger and bigger. Sometimes I can't believe I really go to school, that I can read and write and do my figures. I used to dream about it, but now it's real. And look at us, Papa. We riding around the city on this big wagon. This is much better than worming tobacco plants." Addy saw a smile ease back onto Papa's face. Papa said, "There is some things better here. You going to school, me and your mama getting paid for our work, and we got a nice room at the boarding house." "Even though Sam and Esther ain't with us yet," Addy said, "you being here done made things much better for me and Mama." "But I want them to be even better," Papa responded. "Hauling ice don't take nothing but muscle. I'm a good carpenter. I got a good mind. I can build anything. Every carpentry job I try to get, they say they don't hire colored folks. Ain't that something, Addy? When we was in slavery, I was a carpenter. Now that I'm free, I found out these white people up north think a colored man ain't good enough or smart enough to drive a nail. That ain't fair, Addy said. Sure ain't, said Papa, but that's the way it is. Papa made 2 deliveries before he came to his last stop at Natkin's confectionery shop. Addy could see a group of white girls about her age sitting at a table eating ice cream. She had walked by this shop once with Sarah, and Sarah had told her they sold ice cream there. Back then, Addy had not even known what ice cream was, but at a church social a few weeks later, Addy had her first taste of it. She loved it. It was creamy and sweet and cold. Without thinking, Addy blurted out to Papa, "It sure would be good to have some ice cream now." As soon as the words had flown out of her mouth, Addy felt awful. She shouldn't ask Papa to spend money on fancy treats, and she also knew that this shop didn't serve black people. She looked again at the group of girls talking happily inside. Papa glanced where Addy was looking. He didn't say anything as he climbed down from the wagon. Addy watched Papa lift a huge block of ice with a pair of large tongs. He rested it on his shoulder, headed down the alley, and went in the side door of the confectionery. On his way out, Papa stopped to talk to a white man who gave Papa a friendly pat on the shoulder. "Was that Mr. Natkin?" asked Addy. Papa climbed back onto the wagon. "Yes," said Papa. "I'm telling you, Addy, this is some kind of freedom. I can deliver ice to make ice cream, but I can't even buy my own daughter a dish of it." "That's all right," Addy said. "I don't like it anyway." Papa looked at her out of the corner of his eye. Addy could tell he didn't believe her. "Let me make sure that door is closed," he said, jumping from the wagon. When Papa returned, he was carrying something. "Look at here what was in the trash," he said. "It's a busted-up ice cream freezer. I bet I can fix it up. Then we'll make our own ice cream." Papa gave Addy a playful nudge. "Won't that be nice?" he asked. "It would be," Addy said. Papa tugged on the reins, and the wagon gave a slow lurch forward. Addy and Papa rode on in silence. She was thinking, Mama, Papa, and I, and all the colored people got a strange kind of freedom here in Philadelphia. There are jobs we can't get and shops we can't eat at just because of the color of our skin. It ain't fair. When Addy thought of it, she felt just as dizzy as she had standing before the spinning loops of the double Dutch ropes. Being a black girl in Philadelphia was like being outside the loops of those ropes. Inside was a world Addy wanted to enter, but right now she was standing on the outside looking in. How would she be able to jump into that other world? Chapter 2, Sunshine. When Addy came home from school the next day, a small wagon loaded with furniture was in front of the tall boarding house. Boarders often moved in and out. Mr. and Mrs. Golden, who owned the boarding house, rented out 5 rooms, but Addy was the only child in the house. She looked carefully at the things in the wagon, hoping to see something belonging to a child, maybe a doll sticking out of a crate. But all she saw was furniture. Mr. Golden came out the front door. Addy thought that his name was perfect for him. His skin was golden brown. "Good afternoon to you, Addy. How are you today?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Golden," Addy said. "I'm doing fine. Who's moving in?" Mr. Golden sat down on the front step and wiped his neck with his handkerchief. "By the looks of all this furniture, you'd think a family of 10 was moving in, but it's just one person. My mother." "Oh," Addy said, a little disappointed that she wouldn't be getting a playmate. "Would you like some help?" "No, but thank you kindly," Mr. Golden said, getting up from the step. He went over to the wagon. Addy went up to her family's room on the 2nd floor. She flopped onto her bed and reached for her doll, Ida Bean, who had been lying on her pillow. Addy loved Ida Bean. She could cuddle with Ida and tell her secrets. But even with Ida to keep her company, Addy still felt lonely during the long afternoons. All the adults in the boarding house were at work. Mrs. Golden was busy making supper for everyone and didn't want to be disturbed. Mama and Papa didn't get home until late. Sometimes they didn't get home in time for the dinner Mrs. Golden served. On those days, Addy still joined the other boarders for supper in the dining room. This evening was one of those times, so when Mrs. Golden rang her bell, Addy went down to the dining room by herself. She took her place at one of the two tables. 4 other boarders sat at that table, but they didn't pay attention to Addy. They were talking about the trouble black people were facing on the streetcars. "Did you see today's paper?" Mrs. Golden asked. "There was almost a riot on a streetcar downtown. 3 colored people were hurt." "I'm getting too scared to even ride the streetcars at all," one woman said. A man at the table joined in. "Well, I heard a conductor threw a colored man off the Pine Street streetcar and broke his leg." "If they'd just let us sit inside, there wouldn't be all this trouble," another young woman at the table added. "That'll be the day," said Mr. Golden sourly. "I'll be an old man before I see that change come." Their talk scared Addy. The longer she listened, the less she was interested in her supper. She began playing with the napkin ring, and she only picked at her dinner of oxtail stew and mashed carrots. After dinner, Addy headed back to her room. She was halfway up the stairs when she heard a bird singing. Quietly, Addy tiptoed back down the stairs. The bird's beautiful song was like a trail that Addy followed down the narrow hall. The trail stopped at the open door of a room at the end. The room was unlit. The faint light from the hall was the only brightness in it. At first, Addy saw only her own shadow in the room. But as her eyes got used to the dimness, she saw a cage hanging before the window. In it was a small yellow bird, sitting on a perch singing out happily. She stood at the door for a minute, enjoying its song. Suddenly a woman's voice interrupted. "You can come in, child." Addy was so startled she jumped. She hadn't seen anyone in the darkened room. She moved a few steps inside. The woman lit a kerosene lamp, and Addy saw the furniture she had seen on the wagon earlier in the day. The woman sat in a high-backed rocker next to the cage. "Good evening, ma'am," Addy said. "I'm Addy Walker. Me and my mama and papa live upstairs. You Mr. Golden's mama?" "That's right," the woman answered. "Come on in and meet my bird Sonny." Addy went over closer to the cage. It was then that she saw the woman's eyes. The colored parts of her eyes, the irises, were covered with a cloudy whiteness. Addy stood staring at the woman. "Didn't know I was blind, did you?" Mrs. Golden asked. Addy answered quickly. "No, ma'am. If you blind, how did you know I was standing outside your door?" "I've got plenty of ways of seeing," answered Mrs. Golden. "I heard your footsteps. They were soft as a whisper, and they were spaced close together, so I could tell you were a child." "How old are you, Addy?" Mrs. Golden asked. "When is your birthday?" "I'm 9, Addy said, "but I ain't really sure about when my birthday is. I was born in the spring. My mama know that much." Addy felt ashamed that she didn't know her birthday. Her seatmate at school, Harriet, knew when her birthday was. On that day, Harriet's mother had sent fancy raisin tarts for the whole class. "That's a shame you don't know your birthday," Mrs. Golden said. "Just listening to you talk, I think you were born into slavery." "Yes, ma'am," Addy said. "How did you know?" "Well, most slaves don't know their birthday," Mrs. Golden continued. "I was born right here in Philadelphia, but my parents were born into slavery over 100 years ago. I'm an old woman, you know. I was there the day God invented dirt." Addy looked at Mrs. Golden in disbelief. Mrs. Golden laughed so light and high, it made the room seem brighter. Addy joined in with her laughter. "You real funny, ma'am," Addy said. "My brother Sam would like you. He likes riddles and jokes." "Your brother?" Mrs. Golden said. "You didn't mention him. Does he live here too?" "No, ma'am," Addy explained sadly. "We don't know where Sam is. He might still be a slave, but he wanted to be a soldier. He and my papa were sold off the plantation. Then my mama and me ran away up here. We had to leave my baby sister Esther on the plantation when we left. But someday, we're going to all be together again." "Slavery has taken a lot away from colored people," Mrs. Golden said. "If we want to get some of it back, we're going to have to take it. It's going to be some time before your family gets back together. But I know one thing you can take for yourself right now, Addy. Whenever you want, you can choose a special day and claim it for your birthday. Addy had never thought about this before. That's a good idea, she exclaimed. I want me a really special day. I want me a perfect day for my birthday. Now, I've told you I've been around a long time, and I never saw such a thing as a perfect day, Mrs. Golden said. How about the day that God invented dirt, Addy joked. Oh, no, 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 Mrs. Golden said. Even that wasn't perfect, but there is something special in every day. How will I know what day is right for my birthday? Asked Addy. You'll just know, answered Mrs. Golden. When that almost perfect day comes along, it'll be meant just for you. Now, the day God invented birds was extra special, close to perfect, and I was there for that too. Sonny seemed to understand what Mrs. Golden was saying. He sang happily with his head cocked back and his breast puffed out. Mrs. Golden, why your bird in that cage? It seemed like he would be sad and lonesome in there all by himself, Addy said. Mrs. Golden closed her eyes for a moment before she answered. I can tell you're a smart girl. You think about things. I do think Sonny is lonely sometimes. I think I can hear it in his song. But we keep each other company. When I hear him singing out from his soul, it brings sunshine into my life. Addy thought about that. But he's still locked up. Oh, child, answered Mrs. Golden. That cage can't contain Sonny's spirit. It soars right out from behind those bars. That's what's important for all of us, to let our souls sing out. Sometimes it's hard to do that, you know, Addy replied, to let yourself sing out if you're feeling lonely or sad. Sure is, Mrs. Golden said, looking right at her. I'll tell you, Addy, when you first spoke to me tonight, I could hear a touch of loneliness in your voice. But even then, I could hear you singing out. Addy looked away from Mrs. Golden. Addy knew she was blind, but she felt like Mrs. Golden was looking deep inside her. Well, I better be going, Addy said. I still have lessons to do, Mrs. Golden. Don't be a stranger at my door now, Mrs. Golden said. Come visit me and Sonny whenever you'd like. And one more thing. Please call me my dear. That's what my family calls me. I will, Addy replied. I will. Chapter 3. Bitter Medicine. During the next week, Addy stopped by Madeir's room each day when she came home from school. Good afternoon, Madeir would call to her before she even reached Madeir's door. Addy usually did her lessons in Madeir's room, and sometimes Madeir had a treat of Benet candy for her when she finished. Addy savored the crispy, sugary wafers filled with sesame seeds while she listened to stories Madeir told her. Madeir told Addy that her father had been a soldier in the Revolutionary War, and that when she had been a chore girl working on Society Hill, Thomas Jefferson had visited a house where she worked. Addy loved the stories Madeir told, and was happy that Madeir was her friend. Addy still spent Saturdays by herself, because Papa and Mama had to work. But this Saturday was going to be different. Mama had told Addy on Thursday, I know you enjoy Madeir's company, but she's an old woman. She need a rest. Why don't you ask Sarah to come over on Saturday morning? Do you really mean it, Mama? Addy had asked. Mama had never let Sarah come over to play before. Me and Papa think you should play together more than you do, Mama said. Papa was sitting on the floor piecing together the ice cream freezer he had found. Maybe Sarah can help you pick a day for your birthday, he said. Remember, when you pick it, Addy, I'm going to make you ice cream. And you better hurry. I just about got this old freezer fixed. When Saturday morning came, Addy couldn't wait for Sarah to arrive. The night before, Mama had saved sweet cornbread for Addy and Sarah to share. Mama said they could have that and some milk for a treat. Addy spread an old blanket on the floor. She placed 2 small plates, spoons, cups, and the cornbread on it. Then Addy eagerly watched out the window for Sarah. When she saw Sarah coming up the street, Addy thundered down the stairs to meet her. Sarah was carrying a bag, and she had a smile on her face. "What you got in the sack, Addy?" asked Sarah. "It's a surprise," Sarah said, as Addy led her inside and up the stairs. When they got to the room, Sarah looked at the spread on the floor. "This is real nice, Addy," Sarah said. "It's like having a picnic inside." "I thought you'd like it," Addy said, as she poured the milk into their cups. "You're never going to guess what Mama and Papa said. You can help me pick a special day for my birthday." "I think you should pick it all by yourself," said Sarah. "I guess you're right," Addy responded, taking a sip of milk. "I just can't think of a day I want. Don't none seem right enough." After they had finished, Sarah held up her sack in front of Addy and said, "Keep your eyes closed and reach inside the sack for a surprise." "Oh, Sarah," Addy cried as she pulled out a coil of rope. "I thought we could practice some double dutch," said Sarah. "My mama has so many clotheslines from her washing that my papa cut this extra piece for me for us to jump with." The girls rushed outside, where Sarah wound the middle of the rope around a lamppost. She held the two ends in her hands and began twirling. Addy felt a little dizzy as she watched the two loops of the rope cross over one another. Again and again she tried to jump in, but Addy's feet always got tangled in the ropes as soon as she did. Sarah continued to encourage her. "That was a good try, Addy." Addy was feeling discouraged when she heard Madeir say, "Addy, take your time. Watch the ropes, but listen, too." Addy looked up to see Madeir sitting at the window. Addy introduced Sarah to Madeir, who asked Sarah to start the ropes again. "Now listen to those ropes," Madeir coached Addy. "They're singing out a rhythm. Hear it. Hear it, Addy? Tip-tap, 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 tip-tap. Jump to that rhythm. You can do it." Addy had never listened to the ropes before. She had only watched them. Now she rocked back and forth before the twirling ropes, listening, getting her body set to their rhythm. Then she jumped in. She jumped 4 times before she missed. She had never done so well. "You gettin' it," Sarah said. "That was much better." Addy was encouraged. "Did you see me, Madeir?" "I saw," Madeir said. "I saw." Sarah started twirling the ropes again. Addy's hands were sweating with anticipation. "I can do it, I can do it," she repeated to herself. Addy watched the ropes and listened. Tip-tap, tip-tap. Tip-tap, tip-tap. When she was ready, she leapt in between the loops. She was jumping, 8 times in a row, 10, 12. She was losing count. A big smile burst onto Addy's face. Sarah shrieked with delight. Then the ropes twisted around Addy's feet. Sarah rushed to Addy and gave her a hug. "I knew you could do it, Addy. You was great." "I can't believe it," Addy said happily. "I finally got it." She turned to the window, but Madeir was gone. Addy jumped rope for a while longer. Then Sarah had her turn. When they got tired, they went inside to Madeir's room. Madeir's door was open, but she was not sitting in her usual place by the window. Instead, she was lying down with a wet cloth on her forehead. Sunny was silent. "Madeir, you feel all right?" Addy asked softly. "I was just resting," answered Madeir. "I have a terrible headache, and I've run out of medicine." "I'll go to the druggist and get you some more," Addy offered. "It's only a few blocks from here. Sarah will go with me." "If you're sure it wouldn't be any trouble," Madeir said. "We'd be glad to go," Addy assured her, taking the blue bottle from the table next to Madeir's bed. "We'll be back real quick." Madeir gave Addy 50 cents. "Get yourselves a treat while you're out getting my medicine," Madeir said, "and bring back the change." Addy and Sarah went straight to the drugstore, but the clerk said he was out of the medicine Madeir needed. The girls left the shop. "Now what do we do?" asked Sarah in a worried voice. "I know where there's another drugstore on Pebble Avenue," Addy said. "I saw it when I was on the ice wagon with Papa the other day." "But Pebble Avenue is miles from here," said Sarah. "We can take a streetcar," said Addy. "We'll be there in no time." "I don't think that's such a good idea," Sarah said. "You know we can't ride most streetcars." "But we gotta get Madeir's medicine," Addy insisted. "I know which streetcars colored people can ride." Sarah thought for a minute. But they dangerous, she protested. Not if we stick together, said Addy. Come on. Addy and Sarah walked 1 block to the avenue. They waited only a few minutes before a streetcar came, pulled by 2 horses. Like the other black riders, Addy and Sarah had to ride on the outside platform. Only whites could ride inside and sit in the seats. As the horses took off, Addy and Sarah held tightly to the railing. From the first day Addy had arrived in Philadelphia, she had wanted to ride a streetcar. Now, here she was. The horses built up speed, and Addy felt a warm breeze sweeping past her. The city whizzed by. The row houses, the markets, the churches. They were a blur kissed by the green of budding trees. As the streetcar slowed, the city came back into focus. When the streetcar stopped for more passengers, the white people paid their fares first. They moved inside, where there were plenty of seats. The black people who came aboard had to squeeze their way onto the outside platform, which was getting crowded. Addy looked at Sarah, who looked worried. "We almost there," Addy assured her. The car pulled away so suddenly, the man next to Addy lost his balance and stepped on her foot. The people on the platform were crowded so tightly together now that Addy couldn't feel the breeze as the streetcar gained speed. Addy was relieved when they arrived at their stop and could get off. The drugstore was just a block away from the streetcar stop. The girls took off in a hurry, anxious to get the medicine and return to Madeira. When they reached the store, they found a long line of people waiting at the counter. Addy and Sarah went to the end of the line. "We'll be on our way in a few minutes," Addy said to Sarah. The girls inched their way forward in the line. 10 minutes passed before they were up to the counter. Before Addy could open her mouth to ask for the medicine, a man approached the counter. The clerk ignored Addy and waited on him. "We was next," Sarah whispered to Addy. "I know," Addy said softly. "Maybe he used to waiting on grown folks first. He probably ain't see us. He gonna wait on us next." When the clerk finished with the man, Addy started to say, "We'd like to get," but before she could finish her sentence, the clerk walked away to wait on a white girl who had just walked in the door. "You can't say he didn't see us this time," Sarah said. Addy knew that Sarah was right. They watched in surprise as the clerk waited on the girl, who was no older than they were. He talked nicely to her as he filled her order. After the girl handed him her money, the clerk gave her back the change, counting it out in her hand. Finally, the clerk came over to Addy. "What do you want?" he asked in a stern voice that startled her. Addy handed him the medicine bottle and asked for another just like it. "Do you have money?" he asked. Addy thought that was a strange question. "Why would I be here if I ain't have money?" she thought. She tried to hand the clerk her money. "Put it on the counter," he demanded. Addy glanced at Sarah, who was looking at the floor. As Addy placed the money on the counter, she felt her face getting hot. She was angry and hurt. This was how her master had talked to her on the plantation. After Addy put the money on the counter, the clerk took it and got the medicine. Then, instead of handing Addy her change, he slapped it down on the counter. Some of it rolled onto the floor. Sarah scrambled to get it. Without saying a word, Addy picked up the medicine and the girls left the shop. Addy and Sarah started down the avenue, walking hand in hand, to wait for a streetcar to take them back across town. "That man treated us so bad," Addy said. "Because we colored," Sarah added. "Some white folk think they're better than us." "But that's not right," protested Addy, hurt and confused. "No, it ain't," agreed Sarah. "But things ain't always right." When they got back to the streetcar stop, a large crowd was waiting impatiently. The first streetcar that came along was packed. It didn't even stop, and some of the people waiting on the corner began to grumble. "We gotta get on this next one," Addy said anxiously. "Madeira waiting for her medicine." It was 20 minutes before another car came. It stopped, and Addy, Sarah, and the rest of the black passengers got on, crowding the platform. As the streetcar pulled out, they were packed so closely that Addy didn't have to hold on to the railing. She held tightly to the bottle of medicine. At the next stop, the conductor yelled out, "White passengers only!" A white man made his way through the crowd and got on. He pushed through the black passengers on the platform and sat down in one of the empty seats inside. "That's not fair," a black man in overalls called up from the street. "We've been waiting for a car for an hour." A woman standing near the man added, "There's plenty of room if you let us ride inside." "I don't make the rules," the conductor replied. "You'll have to wait for the next car." "We won't wait," the black man in the overalls yelled. He and some of the other people who had been waiting pushed their way onto the car. The conductor's voice boomed, "Get off this car! Get off!" Addy felt her heart beating fast. She looked for Sarah, but Sarah had been pushed past her. As Addy turned, she saw the conductor pushing through the passengers toward the people who had just gotten on the streetcar. Some of them jumped off, but the man in the overalls didn't. He held onto the railing. When the conductor reached him, he grabbed the man by the straps of his overalls and pulled at him until the man lost his grip and fell to the street. The conductor turned to the black people on the platform. "Now all of you colored people, out," he bellowed. His face was red with fury. "Every last one of you." "We already paid our fare," one woman protested. "I don't care," he screamed. "I'll call the police if every last one of you doesn't get off right now." Addy felt pushing from all sides. A sharp elbow hit her shoulder. Someone trampled over her feet. Addy was caught up in the crowd, and before she knew it, she was swept right off the platform. She fell to the ground, ripping a hole in her stockings and scraping her knee. She watched the streetcar pull away from the stop with no one on the platform and plenty of empty seats inside. Sarah rushed up to her. "Addy, is you all right?" "I guess so," Addy said. "At least I didn't drop my dear's medicine." "I don't want to get back on no streetcar," said Sarah. "Don't worry about that," said Addy. "There ain't no more money for the fare anyway. We used up everything Madeir gave us on the 2 rides we already took." "How far is it to home?" Sarah asked. "It's a long way from here," Addy said. "A long way."